Well, here's something you don't see every night. First-hand accounts of real-life exorcisms from Catholic priests trained by the Vatican. They say they've seen demons in action. Take a look.
I command you, Satan, enemy of human salvation, acknowledge the justice and goodness of God the Father.
A voice comes out of the living room. Get out.
Who by his righteous judgment has damned your pride and envy.
His back starts to arch and he's like,
Depart from this servant of God, whom the Lord has made in his own image.
So he picks up the book and that baby voice again. He goes, I read this book.
Many will dismiss the idea of the devil taking possession of a person. But the priest in this tiny town near the border of Ohio and Indiana is now known all over the world for his work around just that. He never even wanted to become an exorcist and says what he's seen isn't far off the movies.
When I saw a person levitate during an exorcism during my training in Rome, I think I was sitting there with my jaw wide open.
In the face of the enemy.
Let the enemy have no power over.
Famous scenes portray pretty extreme manifestations of the devil.
The Father, Jesus Christ.
But this vision claims to capture the authentic exorcism of a woman who'd suffered abuse before turning to drugs and prostitution.
So when an exorcism is performed, the exorcist is in charge of the scene, and nobody should interject or do anything. When I was appointed in 2005, I became one of only about 12 officially appointed exorcists in the United States.
Father Vincent Lampert is one of America's few Vatican-trained exorcists, living there for 3 months to learn how it's done.
So during my time in Rome, I sat in on 40 exorcisms and was able to learn firsthand again the church's ministry to those up against the demonic.
His stories of witnessing the devil at work as a qualified exorcist are nothing short of haunting.
As soon as I started praying, she lunged at me like a wild dog. She's like, whoa!
Oh my God.
I think I jumped back 5 feet, and this voice that came out of her mouth said, well, who's he? He has no power over us.
That's what happened when he was trying to help a woman who'd become possessed at the hands of childhood trauma, raped by her father.
And I went over and laid my hands on her head and started praying, and then the demon started laughing uncontrollably at me and says, you can't get rid of us. We've been here too long and you're not strong enough.
So you remember the sound? That's what the voice sounded like?
Oh yeah, usually the manifestation is always, you can't get rid of us. We've been here too long. Again, it's that sense of wanting to instill fear.
Lampert uses various rituals, including insufflation, a breathing prayer, which with one woman roused the devil in a frightening way.
The chair flew back and hit the side of the altar. The person flew up out of the chair, and you heard this shriek, scream.
I mean, hearing that happen and visualising that happen, the cynic in me says, I can't imagine that being a plausible thing to happen, for someone to fly off a chair and...
I mean, I just breathed, and you would have thought that they were hit with a hurricane-force wind. The chair just went back like that, and then the person, you hear this shriek as they come up out of the chair and then fall on the floor.
So that 100%, that's what happened?
That's absolutely.
That's frightening. Father Lampert tells me he's receiving about 1,800 calls, emails and letters every year from people all over the world who believe they're possessed. More than half of those, he says, come from people who aren't even Catholic or religious at all.
When I was first appointed, I would get maybe 3 or 4 calls a week. Now I get like 35 calls a week.
This massive spike in requests, he thinks, is due to religion diminishing around the world.
Because faith is in decline, when people experience something in their lives that they can't really figure out, then it leads them to believe that maybe it's something evil or demonic.
But it's not as simple as believing you're possessed and calling an exorcist. The Catholic Church has strict protocols and processes that priests must follow before deeming an exorcism to be appropriate.
Exorcists are trained to be skeptics. I should be the last person to believe that a person is possessed. Every other possible explanation needs to be exhausted before I make that determination. The very first step of the protocol would be for the person to have some type of psychiatric evaluation.
Those wanting help then have to answer a series of questions covering their psychological history and whether they've had addiction issues. They're also asked if they have had any experience or history of engaging in the occult, witchcraft, black magic, magicians, fortune tellers, crystals, wizards or game boards. Other questions include, have you ever tried to communicate with spirits, demons or the devil itself? And do you truly want to be free of the evil influences you believe are presently affecting you? Will you do what must be done?
I witnessed eyes rolled in the back of the head. I've seen eyes turn completely black, where there's just nothing there but like total darkness, foaming at the mouth.
The Catholic Church doesn't allow filming of exorcisms to protect the identity of those afflicted, but others not sanctioned by the Church have been.
Exorcisms don't take place on a dead-end street at midnight in an abandoned house during a thunderstorm.
That's where you would normally do an exorcism. Father Lampert always executes the exorcism in a sacred space, like the church itself.
So I would have the book, I would have a crucifix, would come in and then immediately begin doing the prayer of the church.
He'll then command the demon to
By
depart.
his righteous judgment has damned your pride and envy.
At that point in the exorcism, if you see that disturbing behaviour, what do you do to counteract that?
I just continue, I stay focused on the prayer of the church, and I watch and observe everything that's taking place. And if certain parts of the ritual seem to be more effective than others, I just take a mental note of that.
Since I have done exorcisms, I am an exorcist.
3.5 hours drive north, Father Michael Maginot has conducted exorcisms on 15 different people, some needing more than one session.
Kind of surprising that words would have an effect on, a demon.
I cast you out.
But it does. They hate it. They can't stand the prayers. They can't stand being condemned.
Be gone and stay far away from this creature of God.
Father Maginot performed his most high-profile exorcism on a mother and her 3 children who lived in a home right here in the town of Gary, south of Chicago. After making headlines as the portal to hell, the house was demolished. This is where the family believes they became possessed. What started as persistent swarms of flies on the porch transpired into strange noises at night, and ultimately the mother's 12-year-old daughter levitating above her bed, unconscious.
The last night we stayed in the house, that's when it was throwing my children around.
Within months of moving into this rental home with her kids, Latoya Amons knew something wasn't right.
It picked up a lamp from out of my bedroom and threw it into the living room. It was throwing chairs. They were throwing chairs.
Father Maginot was called to the house to speak with the mum, finding what he believed to be several signs of demonic possession, including unexplainable footprints around the house.
I went to the bathroom, I went to the kitchen, if there was a leak or something, they weren't there. They were just around her, but they were wet. And I don't remember seeing them before.
During that conversation, were there any sort of key red flags that made you concerned that this was something?
Took my crucifix, put it on her. She began convulsing. And then I took it off and she stopped convulsing. And I said, you are possessed. You have an aversion to holy objects.
What's claimed to have happened here at the local hospital is disturbing and backed up by medical staff who say they witnessed it in this report. The 7-year-old son started making growling sounds while his eyes rolled back into his head. His older brother then walked up a wall backwards, flipping over his grandmother.
The nurses were standing in the door and they bagged up saying, "Oh my God, oh my God."
Whose room is this?
The children's grandmother, Rosa Campbell, gave police a tour through the house, which officers recorded.
She saw it forming.
She describes a series of violent occurrences.
And pick him up and throw him into this deep freezer, head first. Like, nobody's gonna believe this, Toya. I knew it. They're gonna think everybody's crazy.
And that's the lingering question. Do demons exist? And do they inhabit the souls of people around us?
What do you say to people who don't think demons are real?
There is no other explanation for certain things.
The role of the church is not to impose, but to propose. So one of the reasons I like to speak out on the topic of exorcism is just to help educate people with what the church actually believes and teaches. And then what people do with that is ultimately up to them.
In 2014, the Catholic Church formally recognised the ancient ritual of exorcism under canon law and approved the creation of the International Association of Exorcists.